The raindrops outside pounded against the floor-to-ceiling windows, producing a dull, urgent sound that enveloped the entire upscale private apartment living room in a suffocating shadow. Today is my 28th birthday, and the air should be filled with the sweet scent of a custom birthday cake and the fullness of red wine. Instead, what enters my nose now is only the clothes scattered in a mess on the living room carpet and the pair of glaring men's shoes by the foyer. I stand in the shadow of the foyer, holding a Black Forest cake I just queued up at the other end of the city for Lucas's favorite. The cake box is still warm to the touch, but my fingertips have already grown cold. The muted wheezing in the living room and the deliberately restrained giggles feel like a blunt knife, slicing through the long-accumulated self-delusion I've kept up for so long. One cut after another. I do not scream, nor do I rush in like a banshee to pull hair. Instead, I calmly slip off my high heels, walk barefoot on the cold floor, and take one measured step toward the half-closed bedroom door. When I push the door open, the scene is so vivid that even the dust in the air has nowhere to hide. My husband, Lucas, is bare-chested, pressing my 10-year-old best friend Chloe beneath him. Chloe, upon hearing the noise, turns her head and, rather than panicking in the least, lifts her exquisitely glossed lips into a provocative smile at me. Lucas slowly sits up from the bed, casually tugs a bath towel around his waist, his face full of impatience and a sense of relief from finally tearing off his mask. He looks at me and doesn't bother with any redundant explanation, sneering as he speaks. Since you've seen it, there's no need to hide it anymore. Olivia, to tell you the truth, every day I've been with you feels suffocating. You're dull, rigid, like a lifeless puppet. And even the rent for this apartment is on me. Right here in front of you. We'll lay it all out and get divorced immediately. This house, the car, and all my assets don't think you'll take a single cent. Walk out with nothing but the clothes on your back. Chloe now also sits up wrapped in the bedsheet, nestling into Lucas's arms with a sassy, venomous tone on her lips. That's right, Olivia. You should look at yourself in the mirror for once. Who in the company doesn't know Lucas has long been tired of you? Be sensible. Grab your broken suitcase and get out of here. And don't ruin the sight. Lucas is about to be promoted to executive vice president of the group. And someone like you, an inept housewife, doesn't deserve his status or position. Listening to their cold taunts, I lower my head to glance at the birthday cake in my hand, which has already become misshapen beyond recognition. And suddenly I find it incredibly ridiculous. I haven't shed a single tear, because tears are for those who deserve them. I throw the cake into a nearby trash bin, then raise my head, my gaze calm and steady as I sweep over these two utterly disgusting faces. I take out a divorce agreement I had prepared long ago from my bag. Actually, the moment the private investigator's report sat on my desk 2 weeks ago, I had already printed this document. I just didn't expect they couldn't even pretend to feel deeply for one more day. I placed the agreement on the coffee table in the living room, my voice cold and devoid of any warmth. Lucas, remember what you said today. Walk out with nothing. As you wish. This apartment and the car. And your pathetic shares, leave them as the coffin for you too, as a reminder for the dead. But remember, when a person goes mad, misfortune follows. Everything you've taken from me today, I will not only make you pay back with interest over 4 years, but I will also make you beg me on your knees. Lucas is momentarily stunned by my cold gaze and the sudden burst of momentum, but he quickly regains his arrogant sneer, scoffing. Don't pretend here. You're a waste who can't live without a man leaving you. And you still want to turn the world upside down. Don't make a fool of yourself here, sign and get lost already. I didn't say another word. In front of them, I cleanly signed my name. Then turned and walked back to the cloakroom. Taking only a few changes of clothes and a briefcase containing my documents. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the top-floor office of a multinational investment group. The city's nightscape glitters coldly. Countless neon lights weave into a vast net, trapping both the bustle and desire within. I sit in a wide, heavy black leather executive chair. My long fingers gently swaying a red wine in a tall glass. The deep red liquid tracing a graceful arc along the inside of the glass. On the desk rests a thick due diligence report. Its cover bearing the logo of the tech group Lucas currently heads. Over these 4 years, the world has known only one ruthless and shrewd female investor in the finance circles. Ms. O. Who has sparked bloodshed in the financial world with precise, centimeter-accurate leverage purchases and hostile takeovers. Few know that the operator who terrifies countless founders is the Olivia who was once driven out. I have spent 4 years arming myself into a poised blade. And the first target of this blade is Lucas. In these 4 years, Lucas has trod on my hard-earned money and, using the patents I once had that were stolen from my father, clawed his way up to the vice presidency of the group. He thinks himself a darling of the business world. Yet he doesn't realize that the glamorous group he serves has long since become a crumbling building under my covert manipulation. I have, through several offshore companies, quietly bought out more than 80% of the group's core debts and commercial notes. To avoid raising alarms prematurely, I am like a patient but extremely patient leopard, lurking in the shadows, watching Lucas stride with swagger at board meetings. Watching him attend high-end banquets with Chloe. Savoring false power and wealth. The desk phone suddenly vibrates. My aide, David, pushes the door open and places the latest financial infiltration report gently in my hand. Reporting in a low voice. Boss. As you predicted. Lucas. Aiming to win a flagship project at next month's industry summit. Has secretly diverted the group's liquidity and even signed multiple high-interest collateral agreements. If we cut the final cash flow just a little, the entire building will collapse instantly. I withdraw my gaze from the night view, red lips curving slightly. And there isn't a trace of warmth in my eyes. I open the document and look at the debt transfer contracts Lucas signed with his own hand. My voice is soft. Yet the chill it carries is piercing. Very good. Notify the major banks and creditors below, starting tomorrow, to issue debt acceleration notices to Lucas's company in 3 batches according to the original plan. Also, help me prepare a special gift to be delivered to his new headquarters desk. David takes the command and leaves. And the vast office returns to a deathly silence. I turn around to face a wall of business charts. The red marker densely marking every loophole and fatal weakness in Lucas's company. When he took everything from me 4 years ago, he could not have imagined that all his current brilliance would only be the bubble I lent him to manage temporarily. The sea breeze howled at the construction site of the Seaside Luxury Resort Hotel. The enormous white European-style domes refracting dazzling light under the sun. And the air was heavy with the scent of expensive champagne roses and sea salt. This is the top private resort hotel by the sea. And also the venue where my brother Leo is about to hold his milestone wedding. As the only one in the family who still makes me feel a trace of warmth. Leo, years ago, disregarded his parents' advice and resolutely chose to support my departure from that vile quagmire, even secretly financing me when I was deepest in trouble. Now, Leo has begun to stand out in the architectural world with his own strength, and is about to marry a daughter from a prestigious noble family. All wedding preparations are being handled by me alone. And the level of luxury has shocked the entire upper class. I am walking on the Persian carpet in the main banquet hall in high heels, holding a tablet computer to check the final program. And the ambient sound is the melodious notes of a live orchestra tuning the cello. Everything is operating at a high speed according to the perfect trajectory I've customized. At this moment, my assistant David briskly walks through a carved archway to my side and hands me the latest intelligence, lowering his voice to say, "Boss, I've found out. Lucas recently tried to curry favor with the rich by illicit means and obtained VIP invitations to this wedding. Now he's bragging all over that he's the guest of honor of the hotel's biggest investor. And he brought Chloe with him, intending to use the occasion to network with more financial bigwigs, to cover up the truth of his company's capital chain breaking." I pause, take the tablet, and the screen clearly shows a paparazzi-style photo of Lucas and Chloe in a high-end restaurant, looking spirited. In the photo, Lucas is wearing a bespoke suit, embracing Chloe, who is covered in luxury accessories. A victorious grin on his face that makes him seem like the demon who kicked me out of the family 4 years ago has become an unstoppable business elite. I look at the photo and coldly laugh, closing the tablet. What a reckless fool. He thinks this is a stepping stone to climb higher. But he doesn't know I deliberately added his name to the bottom of the guest list to lure him into a trap. Inform the hotel security and the on-site media the moment he steps into the hall. Every camera angle must be aimed at him. I will make him lose face in front of everyone. David is about to back off when a sudden commotion erupts at the distant red carpet entrance, accompanied by the crisp sounds of high heels striking marble floors. A few hotel executives are ushering in several uninvited guests. I tilt my head slightly and see that Lucas has actually arrived on site a day early with Chloe for a field survey. As soon as he enters, he adopts a swaggering pose and loudly berates the manager beside him. That petty, triumphant sneer is so apparent it can make one feel nauseous from 10 meters away. I do not step forward immediately. Instead, I stand in the shadow of a colossal Roman column, coldly watching him swaggering around the wedding venue that rightfully belongs to my brother like a fool. Lucas seems to sense something, suddenly turns his head and glances in my direction. But due to the backlight and distance, he fails to recognize the woman standing there in top-tier haute couture professional attire, radiating an aura. Who is his 4 years ago ex-wife who was trampled by him? He only sneers and rolls his eyes toward this direction, then embraces Chloe and bursts into a wild laugh, swaggering into the VIP lounge. The first ray of morning sunlight pierced the thin mist above the seaside resort hotel, casting the entire open lawn in a fairy tale glow. White lilies and the fragrance of champagne roses lined the two sides of the walkway, and a melodic violin concerto floated through the air. Today is my younger brother Leo's grand day. As the host and his sister, I stand beside the main stage, carefully checking every detail. However, fate seems to enjoy stitching in nauseating interludes to punctuate the climax. Just as the guests began to take their seats and the on-site atmosphere reached its first peak, a shrill burst of laughter shattered the elegant mood. I turned my head and saw Lucas strolling into the lawn ceremony area, arm in arm with Chloe, who wore a limited edition Chanel haute couture gown and swayed gracefully. Lucas today was full of vigor, his hair neatly slicked back, a precious blue gemstone brooch pinned on his chest, and a look on his face that carried that long mist, nauseating superiority. He clearly hadn't expected the mastermind behind this grand wedding to be me. When his eyes landed on me directing the scene under the flower arch, his steps paused abruptly, and a malicious, cruel smile curved his lips. He shoved aside a greeter, strode toward me, and his eyes betrayed no attempt to hide the condescension from 4 years ago. Another 2 steps away from me, he stopped, hands in his suit pockets, and in a voice only the two of us could hear. He jeered through a cold, sarcastic bite. Oh. So I'm wondering who spent so much to buy this seaside hotel for a wedding. The person is my ex-wife. Huh. How's it feel? After leaving me, you've taken to odd jobs or leeching off the rich to finally get a taste of this top-tier lifestyle. Looking around at all these socialites, isn't your heart nearly going mad with envy? To tell the truth, the moment you dumped me and left me bankrupt is something I remember clearly to this day. Today I'm gracious enough to grace this occasion with my presence. You should be grateful. Kneel. And thank me. Remember, leaving you back then was absolutely the best decision I've made in my life. Chloe also strutted over in towering high heels, exaggeratingly covering her mouth and laughing derisively, voicing her support in a sultry tone. Exactly. Olivia. Look at you now. All dressed up like a decent person. You know you rented this outfit from some second-hand luxury shop. You're basically a goose in a swan's skin. Lucas is now the hotel's core VIP, about to clinch a multi-billion-dollar deal. And you're just a servant running around serving tea and water. I advise you to recognize the situation quickly and get lost. Don't humiliate yourself here or offend the guests. We won't spare you. Faced with these two clownish acts, I couldn't be bothered to lift my eyelids. I picked up a glass of Veuve Clicquot champagne, pressed my red lips into a thin line, and let my gaze rest calmly and deeply on these two stupid fools who knew nothing of life. Just as I was about to open my mouth to crush their pretentious vanity with the coldest words, a sudden change occurred. A chorus of silver bells rang from the children's corner on one side of the lawn. Immediately, a little girl in a pink princess dress, with delicate cornrow braids and a finely carved little face, ran toward me like a cheerful fawn, clutching a fluffy teddy bear in her hand. The surrounding guests turned with astonishment, unsure which audacious child would suddenly burst into the core area of this top-tier wedding. Yet, in front of hundreds of business elites, this 3-year-old girl seemingly strolled forward with no hindrance. She tightly hugged my slender legs, pressed her rosy little face against the hem of my dress, and looked up with a bright, sweet voice that carried a hint of milk scent, calling crisply, "Mom, I miss you so much. Mom, give me a hug. Little Lee loves you the most." With a thunderclap, the previously hushed lawn fell into a deathly silence. Hundreds of stunned, astonished, and gossiping gazes swiveled to the suddenly appeared 3-year-old girl, then sharply shifted to my unruffled face. The vicious smile on Lucas's face froze in an instant. His eyes, once full of mischief, widened so much that the eyeballs nearly fell from their sockets. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. Bending down to gently cradle the girl in my arms, then glancing at the child who called me Mom, he stood there as if struck by lightning. Stunned, Chloe, as if seeing a ghost, screamed in shock, pointing at the girl in my arms, her voice trembling, incoherent. This is impossible. You, the one who was disowned and kicked out. How could you have such a big bastard? Whose child is this bastard after all? The air on the seaside lawn seemed to be sucked dry at this moment, as hundreds of fashionably dressed business elites and magnates held their breath, not daring to exhale. Everyone's gaze, as if pulled by a magnet, fixed intensely on the young woman who was gently cradling the 3-year-old girl in her arms. I patted my daughter's back softly, letting the warm scent of milk dispel the last hint of gloom in my heart. And standing opposite, Lucas's face had sunk to an extreme. His normally ferocious grin flickered with white and green. His muscles convulsed violently, and his eyes showed both doubt and a humiliation at being publicly slapped in the face. He could not understand why 4 years ago, the ex-wife he had driven out of the house with nothing, not only hadn't ended up on the streets but had shown at this top-tier aristocratic wedding. And even suddenly produced a child who looked extremely noble in origin. Just as the hall sank into a bizarre, deathly silence, to the point that even the symphony paused. A neat, heavy step sounded from the crowd's periphery. A few burly men in black suits, top-level bodyguards, parted the crowd with blank expressions, carving out a wide passage through the crowded guests. Then, a tall, imposing figure with a commanding aura strode forward with unhurried grace. The man wore a handcrafted all-black suit, the shirt collar slightly open, revealing a sculpted Adam's apple and a superior neckline. His features were three-dimensionally carved, as perfect as marble statues, and an aura of terrifying authority exuded from head to toe, born of years in high places and mastery over others. It was the globally renowned name Ethan, the behind-the-scenes ruler of a multinational capital empire, the billionaire whom countless people dream of meeting once in a lifetime. The scene immediately gasped in unison, with many business magnates recognizing Ethan instinctively bowing their heads in reverence. Yet, what shocked everyone to the core was that this normally cold, ruthless, decisively merciless business myth, the moment he saw Maya's icy gaze melted into an overwhelming tenderness. Ethan walked with steady steps directly to my side, naturally extending his arm and affectionately wrapping his slender waist. He leaned slightly and planted a gentle kiss on my forehead, then turned his head, and his eyes, as sharp as cold stars, coldly swept toward the opposite Lucas, who had turned ashen. Ethan's voice, deep and magnetic, yet carrying an absolutely oppressive chill. My dear daughter and wife, have some senseless flies disturbed your interest here? That sentence exploded like a heavyweight bomb on a calm surface, instantly propelling the entire wedding into an indescribable climax. The guests were stunned, their astonishment swelling into a storm of speculation. What? That 3-year-old girl isn't a stray child but the biological daughter of Ethan, the world's top magnate, and the ex-wife Olivia, who Lucas had 4 years ago dismissed as boring, useless, and heartlessly abandoned, is actually the legitimate wife of this country-defying business myth, the true mistress standing at the pinnacle of power. Lucas's leg suddenly sagged. If it weren't for Chloe quickly grabbing his arm with swift reflexes, he would have collapsed onto the Persian carpet on the spot. His eyes widened, lips quivering, mind blank, fear gnawing at his insides as if 1,000 snakes were biting him. He could not reconcile the imposing, queenly woman before him with the humble, washing hands and cooking soup memory of the tenant house woman who once took care of him. Chloe's face turned pale with fright, her whole body trembling as if shaken to pieces. She pointed at me, her voice sharp and almost rising in pitch. This is impossible. You're lying. She is clearly a dumped. Ah. Chloe's terrified scream had barely left her mouth when Ethan gave a casual glance, and the trained security chief beside him, flanked by 2 black-clad guards as solid as towers, stepped in front of them. Their cold gazes looked as if they were surveying 2 corpses. Ethan didn't even bother to meet their eyes. He simply lowered his head and gazed indulgently at my daughter in my arms, then gently said to me, "Sweetie, the flies outside are too noisy. Dad has already put them on permanent blacklist at all top venues. Let's go inside. Don't let these dirty things dirty your eyes." I linked my arm with Ethan's, and with a haughty glance swept over Lucas, whose face was ashen. My red lips parted, and I spoke clearly and frostily. "Don't worry. The real show has just begun." In the majestic main banquet hall of the Seaside Resort Hotel, Crystal chandeliers refract dazzling light, lighting the entire marble floor as bright as daytime. A soaring symphony resumes, and the air is filled with the aroma of premium black truffles and vintage champagne. Yet, the contrast with this luxurious, elegant atmosphere is starkly highlighted by Lucas and Chloe, standing in the center of the hall as if fallen into an ice cellar. The overwhelming shock they just endured on the lawn had not fully digested, when a commercial tsunami followed, crashing in with unstoppable force. The giant LED screen at the front of the banquet hall, which had been showing the newlyweds' sweet wedding photos, suddenly flickered without warning, accompanied by a few sharp notification chimes. An emergency announcement jointly issued by a national authoritative financial channel and major banking groups instantly flooded the entire screen. Lucas, currently serving as vice president and core partner of a tech group, is suspected of long-term financial fraud, deliberate embezzlement of funds, and severe insolvency. He has been jointly petitioned to bankruptcy liquidation by several top financiers, and all assets have been frozen across the board. The entire room fell into an uproar, with countless glances filled with mockery, condescension, and schadenfreude all directed at the face-down, pale Lucas. This sudden, devastating blow struck like a series of sledgehammers, making Lucas feel the world spin, ears ring, and vision darken. He fixed his gaze on the stock code of his group displayed on the giant screen, turning into a terrifying negative, and his knees could no longer bear his weight. With a wet, clumsy plop, he knelt down on the marble floor. The dull thud of knee meeting floor echoed through the empty banquet hall, but he could not feel the pain. For years ago, he had cast me out to curry favor with the powerful and looked down on me as boring. 4 years later, the business empire he had labored to construct was being utterly destroyed in less than a minute. And the mastermind behind this destruction was the woman he had once treated as an insect and discarded, Olivia. Just as Lucas collapsed and trembled on the ground, the door of the banquet hall sounded again with steady footsteps. A few banking executives in sharp suits and investigators, led by a secretary, David, strode into the opulent hall. The leading bank president held a thick stack of legal documents and walked straight through the crowd, stopping in front of the distraught Lucas. The president looked down with a cold, icy voice at Lucas kneeling on the ground. Mr. Lucas, given that during your tenure you are suspected of serious embezzlement, improper high-interest pledges, and malicious fraud of bank loans, with the total amount involved reaching hundreds of millions, based on the joint ruling of the court and major creditors, all of your personal assets, real estate, and luxury cars are immediately frozen. This is the court seizure order and summons. Please cooperate. This sentence completely shattered the last shred of Lucas's luck. He suddenly sprang up like a crazed person, desperately trying to grab the president's sleeve, but was mercilessly shoved aside by the surrounding security. Extreme fear and despair twisted Lucas's facial muscles. He looked around and suddenly spotted me, standing above, with Ethan's arm linked and a cold, distant gaze. In that moment, all dignity, arrogance, and vanity were crushed to powder. The instinct to survive drove him, like a stray dog, to crawl toward me. He stopped just a few centimeters from my shoe tips, tears streaming down his face as his voice, hoarse with despair, rose in a near-wailing tone. Olivia. Wife. No. Olivia Duan. I was wrong. Back then I was foolish for a moment, blinded by pig-brained vanity, and did that crazy, monstrous thing. Please. For the sake of the years we spent as a couple, spare me this time. You are now a high and mighty matriarch of a powerful family. With a mere finger you could save my company from ruin. Please tell Mr. Ethan, to let me go. I'll be your slave. Do anything for you. Please. I slowly pulled my sweat-soaked hand away from him, attempted to step closer to the hem of his skirt, and looked down on the man who once had been arrogant and now is as humble as mud. My eyes carried no anger, no gleeful revenge, only an extreme coldness that comes from seeing through the affairs of the world. I slightly leaned forward, and in a voice only the two of us could hear, I spoke word by word into his ear. Lucas, when you drove me out of the house back then, did you ever imagine there would be today? You found me uninteresting, unworthy of you. But you never knew that everything you were proud of was nothing but the charity I left you long ago. Everything today is the retribution you deserve. Want me to spare you? Next life. After speaking, I no longer cast another glance at him, tightening the arm around Ethan beside me, and turned toward the VIP lounge in the banquet hall. Behind me, Lucas uttered the most desperate scream, which was mercilessly drowned out as law enforcement officers surged and pinned him to the ground. The luxurious crystal chandelier in the hotel VIP lounge emits a soft yet chilling glow, and the heavy soundproof walls block the residual commotion from the banquet hall outside, while the air is thick with a more nauseating agitation and despair. Just moments ago, Lucas and Chloe were intimate and inseparable, like conjoined twins. Now they sit on opposite sides of a genuine leather sofa. The glint in their eyes no longer the same ardent affection but venomous resentment and madness, as Lucas's conglomerate collapsed and his personal assets were frozen. The once aspirational aristocratic dream designed to cement their high society status shattered into fragments. Chloe's couture Chanel dress, worth tens of thousands, was smeared from the earlier panic. Her delicate makeup had cried away completely, black eyeliner streaming down her pale cheeks, making her look like a ridiculous yet terrifying vengeful specter. Lucas, you complete and utter waste. You liar. Chloe suddenly shrieks hysterically, no longer able to maintain her usual haughty green tea pose. She leaps up from the sofa, stomping in stiletto heels toward Lucas, her painted red nails raised, and delivers a hard slap to Lucas's face. The crisp slap resonates through the quiet lounge, and Lucas's cheek instantly blooms with several red imprints. Chloe points a finger at Lucas's nose, her voice piercingly sharp almost to the ear. Weren't you saying you'd soon sit as the group's vice president? Weren't you promising that following you would bring endless wealth and glory? Now great, the company is bankrupt. The economic investigation team is about to arrest people. You even used our $2 million in private money under your name to fill the company's losses. You bastard. You've ruined me. Lucas, already on the edge of a mental breakdown, is struck by the blow, and his remaining sanity is swallowed by furious rage. Like a cornered beast, he springs up from the sofa, backhands Chloe hard, and roars with a savage face. You whore pretending to be virtuous. Back then didn't you come to me, actively seducing old Jean, whispering in my ear to drive Olivia away? Didn't you say Olivia was an eyesore of a yellow-faced old hag? When you spent my money, why didn't you say I was worthless? All those luxury bags you bought, the Porsche you drove, weren't they all bought with Olivia's blood and the company's blood? Now that I've fallen, you want to walk away with a pat on the butt. I tell you, there's no way out. I've got every bank transfer and chat record you helped me move company assets and collude on fake accounts for. If we die, we all die together, no one escapes. Hearing the words asset transfers and fake accounts, Chloe's face immediately goes deathly pale. The venom in her eyes is instantly replaced by extreme fear, and she scrambles to her feet, crawling and rolling toward Lucas to grab his pant leg, her voice trembling as she pleads. Lucas. No. Dear Lucas. I was just reckless nonsense a moment ago. After so many years of us. How can you treat me like this? Those fake accounts were led by you. I was just following your orders. You can't pin all the blame on me. Please. Delete those records. If you let me go. My parents overseas still have some savings. I'll get them to help you run away. Run away. A cold sneer suddenly comes from outside the door. Now the Customs and the Economic Investigation Team have long laid a spider's web. Where would you run to? Special Assistant David, followed by 2 security guards, pushed the door open. He held a phone with the loudspeaker function turned on, clearly recording the 2 people's recent brawling and dog-eat-dog mutiny in the name of self-preservation. David looked down from a commanding height at the 2 miserable wrecks on the floor. His eyes filled with unhidden disdain. Gentlemen. Just now in the lounge you were having a brilliant conversation. Not only did the hotel's internal CCTV relay it to the case terminal of the Economic Investigation Unit, but I also inadvertently synced it to the live streams of several major media platforms. Now, tens of millions of viewers online are watching your dog-eat-dog spectacle of the century. David's words hit like a thunderclap, shattering Chloe's last line of defense. Her eyes rolled. She let out a despairing scream, and she collapsed stiffly to the cold floor, motionless. Meanwhile, Lucas turned ashen, slumping on the sofa with hollow, lifeless eyes, muttering to himself, completely losing the will to resist. In front of the Citicorp Business District Bureau of Economic Investigation, a square basks in early summer sunlight that carries a nearly blinding pallor, casting the grand and solemn law enforcement building in an air of majesty and inviolability. At the steps below, countless media reporters with long guns and short cannons have encircled the main entrance. Flashbulbs flicker in succession, and the air is thick with whispered anxieties and excitements. Just half an hour ago, the top-tier law firm team I personally instructed and dispatched, armed with hundreds of pages of irrefutable financial audit reports and the core chain of evidence, formally filed a real-name indictment against Lucas with the Economic Investigation Department. The evidence not only covers Lucas's long-time abuse of his position to siphon off the parent company, falsify financial statements, and illegally transfer assets, but also directly seals his criminal acts of business fraud and embezzlement. Once an unassailable elite in the capital market, he now reveals a grotesque and hopeless ugliness beneath the absolute iron fist of the law. The heavy bulletproof glass doors slowly rolled open. 2 stern-faced economic crime investigators on either side escorted the gaunt, unfocused Lucas out. By now Lucas had completely lost the vigor that his wedding day once inspired. His custom luxury suit was creased, his tie slanted to one side, his hair disheveled like dead grass. More shocking was that his once agile, calculating hands were now tightly locked in cold, heavy titanium alloy handcuffs. The dazzling magnesium lights surged toward him like a tide. Countless microphones jostled up to his mouth, and reporters' sharp and urgent questions rained down like a dense shower. Mr. Lucas, how do you respond to the multi-million-dollar embezzlement charges? There are rumors that your company was maliciously acquired and strangled by a mysterious magnate. Is this related to your ex-wife whom you abandoned 4 years ago? Facing the overwhelming barrage of questions and cameras, Lucas stood like a walking corpse, his legs so heavy they barely moved, his lips trembling violently. But he couldn't utter a complete sentence. Just as Lucas was forcibly shoved into the back seat of the police car, he seemed to sense something and suddenly turned his head. Through the half-dropped car window, he cast a despairing and resentful gaze toward me, who stood in the shadow at the entrance of the Economic Investigation Bureau. I stood quietly there, wearing a sharply cut pure black haute couture coat, a pair of black sunglasses, wind playing with my hair, exuding an aura of absolute control that looked down upon the world. Lucas's lips trembled as a nearly broken whimper escaped him through the window, as if he wanted to apologize and beg for mercy. But the car door slammed shut with a merciless bang, cutting off all sound and sealing his last chance for a comeback. The police car sped away, tearing up dust and sending the man who betrayed his marriage and trampled true feelings to the place where he would be judged. Meanwhile, at the city's other end, Assistant David leads a massive team composed of top lawyers and professional liquidators to conduct a carpet-like, forceful seizure and recovery of all illicit gains under Lucas and Chloe. Chloe has just awakened from hospital anesthesia, tears not yet wiped away. When legal and debt collection personnel arrive to read out asset freeze and joint litigation notices on the spot, all the luxury bags, jewelry, and even the used cars she accumulated through fraud and illegal transfers were marked with red seals, leaving nothing behind. The girl who once dreamed of using youth and beauty as her calling card to break into high society not only had her dream utterly shattered, but implicated in joint embezzlement and economic fraud, faces years in prison. She sat on the empty apartment floor, disheveled, madly tearing at her hair, letting out desperate, piercing cries. But all she got in response were the cold, empty walls. Standing before the panoramic floor-to-ceiling window of a commercial building's top floor, I held a cup of warm black coffee, overlooking the bustling city teeming with traffic below. The sun pierced through the clouds, shining on the glittering river, refracting into dazzling light. For this day, I had spent an entire 4 years refining myself from a weak person dependent on marriage into an unstoppable business weapon. From leaving with nothing but the clothes on my back to now coldly settling scores, I have proven a truth with unassailable facts. The betrayer may feel triumphant for a moment, but fate had already set its price in the dark. And those ants who once tried to trample me into the mud would eventually become mere stepping stones beneath my feet. The high-end law firm's top-floor conference room in the city's financial center was strung with the soft, warm light from the lamps. And outside the floor-to-ceiling windows it was pouring rain. Raindrops the size of soybeans smashing against the glass with a dull, urgent roar. The air carried the scent of expensive pine from the diffuser, but it could not dispel the chilling, oppressive cold that seemed to coagulate in the corners. Along the long ebony conference table sat the top-tier senior legal experts, financial auditors, and asset liquidators from multinational conglomerates. At the far end of the table sat a woman with a corpse-like pallor, body trembling violently. Chloe, Lucas's new lover. She wore the once proud, green tea-like air of superiority she had on the lawn, but now she was unrecognizable. The Chanel bespoke dress she wore, originally expensive, had been soaked by the rain and dried, hanging on her body in a crumpled, clingy way. Her exquisite makeup had melted away, eyeliner and mascara smeared across her face, making her look as wretched as a stray dog. Several senior lawyers in sharp suits sat in silence, slamming a thick stack of legal documents and asset transfer certificates onto the conference table. The lead senior counsel pushed up his gold-framed glasses, his voice cold to the point of no warmth. Miss Chloe, based on the comprehensive penetrating investigation our firm conducted and with strong cooperation from the Detention and Investigation Department, we have completely traced all of your funds over the past 4 years. The evidence shows that you not only colluded with Lucas to illegally usurp a substantial portion of the parent company's assets, but in the 48 hours before the Lucas Group's crash you used false contracts and offshore accounts to attempt to secretly transfer cash and core assets worth $15 million into your own name. This is a criminal filing for suspected economic fraud and embezzlement in Complicity W. With a position of trust. And the Lucas family's old mansion and overseas relatives have also filed joint civil suits with the court accusing you of illegally appropriating their family gifts by deceit. You are about to face severe legal penalties for multiple offenses. The words hit like blows. And Chloe's vision went black in front of her eyes. Her mind blank. She suddenly sprang up from the leather chair. Eyes bloodshot. Frenzied. And screamed. You're talking nonsense. This is all a trap. That money was willingly turned over to me by Lucas. Why say I'm a fraud? I'm innocent. I want a lawyer. I want to see Lucas. As she raved. She stretched out her hands as if to seize the documents on the table, trying to tear them to shreds. Yet the trained security by her side calmly stepped forward, easily pinning her wrists behind her back and forcing her back into the chair. The lead senior counsel didn't even bother to look at her, waving a hand to signal the paralegal to push several key confession agreements and asset forfeiture orders in front of her, and spoke coldly. Miss Chloe. There is no point in throwing a tantrum here. If you choose not to cooperate, we will use every legal means to recover every hidden asset under your name. And your overseas parents will also not be spared. If you sign and confess now and return all the tainted funds, perhaps the judge will consider leniency in sentencing. You have 10 minutes to think. Just as Chloe, utterly hopeless and limp, tears and snot smeared across her face, finally realizing she had fallen completely into an inescapable abyss. The heavy double doors of the conference room slowly opened. I walked in, dressed in a precisely tailored dark green business dress, steps on high heels, calm and unhurried. My assistant David followed behind me, elegantly organizing the dossier. The entire room's legal experts and senior lawyers rose in unison as I walked in, bowing their heads in the highest respect. I walked to the central main seat at the conference table and sat down slowly. My long fingers rested lightly on the desk, my gaze calm and deep as I looked at Chloe, who had once stood tall and now was filthy and wretched. I watched her face twisted by extreme fear, her red lips parting slightly, her voice soft yet carrying an irresistible absolute authority. Chloe. 4 years ago in my living room, when you clung to Lucas and mocked me for having nothing, did you ever imagine you'd end up this betrayed, disgraced, and in jail? The man you schemed to win for yourself is nothing but a coward who would throw you to the wolves to take the blame at any moment. The wealth you obtained by every means is a death sentence leading to the abyss of prison. All of this is the evil fruit you planted back then. And today it must be repaid in full with interest. Hearing my voice, Chloe trembled violently, her unfocused pupils finally focusing on a look of extreme fear. It wasn't until this moment that she suddenly woke up to the realization that from start to finish, she had leapt not only into the pit set by Lucas, but into the ultimate revenge network I had meticulously laid out and steadily built 4 years ago. She wanted to speak, to beg for mercy, to crawl to me on all fours like a dog and kowtow. But only a whistling, wheezing sound came from her throat. I no longer looked at her, gave a slight nod to the chief lawyer beside me, and calmly ordered, continue advancing all legal procedures, ensuring that these 2 parasites spend the remaining long years of their lives in prison. Not a moment's delay. After saying this, I turned away without a trace of hesitation, walking out of the conference room with steady and confident steps. Behind me in the conference room, Chloe's desperate, wailing cries and the crisp sound of handcuffs clashing soon followed. Beyond the giant terrace of the private seafront villa, the endless, majestic deep blue Pacific stretched out. Early summer's sea breeze carried a faint salty scent, brushing the pure white gauze curtains so they fluttered softly with a rustling sound. The sunset slowly sank below the horizon, dyeing the entire sky in a dazzling interweaving of golden red and purple red. After the past few days of ruthless commercial settlements and legal trials, this luxurious villa far from the city seemed like a secluded utopia, shielding the world's clamor, greed, and ugliness behind high walls. I stood quietly at the edge of the terrace beside the glass railing, wearing a loose, comfortable silk maxi dress, holding a cup of freshly brewed warm red tea in my hand, letting the rising steam blur my sight, then be blown away by the sea wind in an instant. On the lawn, my 3-year-old daughter eagerly chased a few fluttering seagulls, her silver bell laughter crisp and delightful. The sun shone on her delicately carved little face, gilding it with a soft golden edge. Not far away, Ethan was walking steadily toward his daughter, carrying a windproof light jacket. This business legend, who in international finance was feared by countless magnates for his decisiveness and ruthlessness, now looked at his daughter with gentleness and indulgence, patiently squatting down to carefully put the clothes on her, even playing along with her childish fairy game, running with her on the lawn. The heartwarming scene of father and daughter fell into my eyes, and the last trace of chill and tension in my heart melted away at this moment. 4 years ago, on that rainy night, I was mercilessly expelled from home, and the world seemed to collapse before my eyes. And 4 years later, I not only possessed absolute power and wealth enough to control the whole situation, but also a family that truly understood how to cherish and protect me, and happiness unbreakable. Assistant David, at this moment, walked softly to a corner of the terrace, gently placing a just-organized final dismissal report on the small round table nearby, and whispered, "Boss, the final judgments from the Criminal Investigation Department and the major courts have just been officially issued. Lucas, convicted of embezzlement, false litigation, and especially large-scale commercial fraud, will be prosecuted on multiple counts, sentenced to 15 years in prison, and his personal assets will be completely confiscated. Chloe, for joint criminal activity and transferring and concealing assets, is sentenced to 8 years and all illegal proceeds are seized. All debts and residual assets under their names have been legally transferred. From now on, these two people no longer exist legally or commercially." I paused slightly, my gaze calmly sweeping over the distant coastline, not turning my head, and simply replied lightly, "Understood. Archive all these files and seal them. From now on, this name need not appear in my sight again." David saluted and complied, then quietly faded away, leaving this quiet private space to me once more. I turned around, back against the warm glass railing, watching Ethan guide his daughter by the small hand toward the terrace. The sunset stretched their shadows long and intertwined, warm and solid. Those unforgettable betrayals, the heart-racking pain in the late nights, and the humiliations treated as abandoned ones, in the sediment of years and under absolute control, had finally become an outdated, trivial black comedy. Under the giant dome of the Global Business Summit's main podium, the dazzling magnesium lights poured down like a galaxy, lighting the venue of tens of thousands as bright as day. The air echoed with the breaths and faint conversations of top global business leaders, financial magnates, and international media. This is the annual grand gathering of the world's most powerful economic forces. And at the center of the audience, holding the microphone and receiving universal reverence, stood me in a deep emerald green haute couture velvet gown. My hair was neatly pulled back, no jewelry embellishments, with just those calm, sharp eyes that seemed to see through everything. I held the entire magnificent venue's gaze in place. On the big screen, Classic cases from my past 4 years in the capital market show I turned the tide. Completed several colossal mergers were playing. Every data point, every decision, was a myth worthy of a modern business textbook. I adjusted the microphone in front of me slightly. My voice steady and powerful. Broadcast clearly to every corner of the room through the top-tier surround sound. Thank you all very much. Many people have asked me, in the face of betrayal, abyss, and the despair of having nothing at all, what force has sustained me to where I am today? My answer is simple. Never entrust your fate to someone else's charity. And never harbor even a shred of pity for traitors. 4 years ago, I thought that was the darkest plight of fate. But today, standing here, I understand that it was fate forcibly stripping away your false bubbles and bestowing upon you the gift of rebirth. After a moment of stunned silence, the audience erupted into thunderous, unending applause. Countless flashbulbs flickered frantically, sealing my poised, confident, all-controlling beauty forever on the headlines of major media. In the front row of the VIP seats, Ethan sat with his daughter, smiling at me from the stage. His daughter waved her little hand and called out in a child's voice, "Mama." At that moment, the audience's gaze transformed into the highest possible coronation for me. As I stepped off the main platform, my aide David was already there, handing me a fresh global strategic layout document. In a low voice he reported, "Boss, the capital integration of Europe and North America's core markets has been completed. Our next target is." I took the document, flipped it open casually, and my eyes landed on the expanding map of the global business empire. Those ants that once tried to trample me into the mud are now not even worthy of mentioning by name. And the road beneath my feet has only just extended toward the true stars and oceans beyond. I turned around, facing the dazzling sunlight breaking through the clouds outside, and strode forward with a resolute and graceful step. Outside the oversized floor-to-ceiling window of the private seaside villa, the night of the Pacific was like a thick black satin. Only the distant lighthouse silently flickering with a cold light. In the room only a dim yellow floor lamp was lit, stretching my figure slouched on the genuine leather sofa into a long shadow. I held a cup of warm black coffee in my hand, my gaze calmly resting on a hardcover financial annual report on my knees, while at the other end of the coffee table lay a few sheets of letter paper that had come from the detention center. Those were confession letters Lucas had entrusted to me through a middleman in his 3rd month of imprisonment. The handwriting on the paper was sloppy and disorderly, exuding a desperate and mad last breath of a dying beast. He used an extremely humble tone to recall the tender days we shared in college, lamenting how greed had blinded him for years, and even plead with me, again and again, to look at him or at least hear him say sorry to me in person. I had not even opened the envelope, only skimmed lightly over the few crooked characters on the envelope, and casually threw it into the nearby shredder, accompanied by a humming mechanical sound. The papers filled with explanations and pleas instantly became countless fragments, no longer able to reconstruct a trace of the past. For someone who once pushed me into the abyss with his own hands, a belated apology is perhaps less valuable than a grain of dust on the roadside. People only understand what they value after they lose it. But once a bottom line is trampled, it becomes a one-way street with no possibility of turning back. I raised the coffee cup and took a small sip. The bitter liquid rolled down my throat, yet my mind became clearer than ever. 4 years of endurance and counterattacks were not only to reclaim justice but also to cut off those meaningless emotional ties once and for all, so that I could truly stand at the summit of my own power and freedom. At that moment, the study door was gently pushed open. Ethan carried our sleeping little daughter inside. the little one clenched tightly to a fluffy white teddy bear she carried during the day. Her chubby face pressed against Ethan's shoulder. Sleeping soundly. Ethan moved quietly, carefully placing his daughter in the neighboring children's room. Then returned to the study. He walked to my sofa, naturally sitting beside me, his long arm gently wrapping around my shoulders, his deep and magnetic voice in my ear. Still reading those boring files. Late-night mental exertion isn't good for beauty. My queen. I leaned into his warm and broad embrace, feeling the absolute safety and steadfast protection that belonged to this man. I placed the coffee cup on the table, turning my head slightly to look into his deep eyes, and spoke softly. I'm just thinking. People can be very ridiculous. They have happiness at their fingertips. Yet they chase after those illusory blossoms, only to end up with nothing. Ethan extended his finely articulated fingers and, with extreme gentleness, tucked the long hair behind my ear. A smirk of indulgence lifting his thin lips. They're stupid. They don't understand what true treasure is. And the luckiest thing in my life is meeting you at your lowest and most solid moment. And having the chance to accompany you as you personally trample those who once trampled you into the mud. Your world doesn't need those trivial noises. Just keep moving forward. Conquer more stars and seas. Upon hearing this, I couldn't help but smile softly. The last ripple in my heart finally settling. Yes. Revenge was never the end. Only a fresh start after sweeping away the garbage. Meanwhile, at the city's other end, in a cold and shadowy solitary confinement cell of the detention center, a completely different scene was unfolding. Lucas wore faded prison clothes, curled up on the hard wooden bed, filthy and disheveled. His eyes were bloodshot, fixed on the small iron window in the dim ceiling. Surrounding him were tall walls, iron fences, and unextinguished searchlights. The air was thick with the smell of antiseptic and the decay despair. Chloe is confined in the female ward separated by several corridors. Subjected daily to grueling physical labor and the cold taunts of fellow prisoners. The face that once made her proud is now filled with weariness and malice. They once believed that betrayal, lies, and greed could keep them firmly at the top of the world. But they never dreamed that when true power and absolute reckoning arrived, they wouldn't even be qualified to be a chess piece. In this farce they directed with their own hands. Their greatest destruction highlights the untouchable legend of my life. The rain outside gradually stopped. The dark clouds dispersed. And a cold, bright moon hung high above the Pacific, scattering silver light over the entire luxurious seaside villa. I stood up, walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, and looked at the distant, surging waves and the endless deep blue sea. A new day is about to begin, and my commercial empire is expanding globally, while my life remains firmly in my own most steadfast hands. In the suite on the top floor of the Seaside Resort Hotel. The enormous floor-to-ceiling windows overlook the glittering Pacific, and the sunset colors the sea into a mosaic off-like splendor. I sit on an Italian leather sofa, my slender fingertips lightly knocking on the screen of a tablet resting on my knees. The screen real-time displays a recently decrypted offshore trust fund liquidation report. Although Lucas and Chloe have already been nailed to the cold prison walls by the iron fist of law, the secret offshore accounts they quietly established back then as a backdoor for retreat had recently bared traces. The world of capital never tolerates even a shred of residue. Cut the weeds to the root, and spring breeze will grow anew. Since I can pull them from the clouds into the mud, I naturally won't leave them any chance to rise again or dream of spending the remainder of their blood and sweat money after parole. Assistant David gently pushes the door open, his leather shoes hardly making a sound on the carpet. He comes to my side and hands me a stack of the latest international judicial assistance documents and asset recovery notices, his tone carrying a hint of professional coldness. Boss. As you previously calculated with precision. The three shell companies Lucas secretly registered in the Caribbean and with Swiss banks have recently begun to launder a large amount of funds back through underground banks. We long since joined forces with the local International Financial Crime Investigation Team and laid a trap. About LF an hour ago. This total hidden asset, amounting to 8 million, has been frozen with pinpoint accuracy. And international judicial pursuit procedures have been officially initiated. This time, they've even cut off their last lifeline with their own hands. I take the documents, casually flipping through a few pages, red lips curving into a chilly yet elegant arc. Lucas thought his money was safe if hidden at the other end of the globe. But he doesn't realize that in the face of absolute capital control and a global financial blacklist, his petty tricks are nothing more than a fleeing clown's dying struggle. I close the documents and speak lightly. Very good. Inform the lawyers on that side not only to recover all assets but also to press additional charges against them for money laundering and concealment of criminal proceeds. I want them to spend every day of the next 15 and 8 years of their sentences in endless debt collect. Ion and despair. With no qualification to sleep peacefully in prison. Just as I'm finishing. Light. Familiar footsteps come from outside. Ethan leads his 3-year-old daughter in by the hand. The moment the little girl sees me, she immediately puffs herself up on short legs like a happy butterfly, charging into my arms. Sweetly coquettish. Mom. Dad just took me to the seaside and caught a super big hermit crab. And built a beautiful sand castle for it. Mom. Do you want to come and see? Looking at my daughter's carved from angel-faced, pure smile, all the cold and killing from my heart instantly melt into a pool of spring water. I gently cradle her on my lap, playfully rub her little nose, and smile. Okay. After I finish this bit of work, I'll take my little princess to see that sand castle. Ethan stands nearby, his deep eyes filled with uncontainable tenderness and approval. He sits down beside me, his long arm naturally draped over my shoulder. Low voice with a smile. It seems my queen of business not only acts decisively in the capital market but can also leave nothing for the unwilling remnants, cutting them off so cleanly, with no mercy left. You really don't give them a single chance. I turn slightly to meet his deep gaze. Red lips parting in a light smile. For those who betray you and try to destroy you, any hint of mercy is cruelty to yourself. The pains I tasted 4 years ago, I now repay them with interest, but only as karmic retribution. Moreover, my world now is already filled by you and your daughter, leaving no room for any noise. At the same time, in the dark, damp detention center and the depths of the prison, and suffocating despair is unfolding. Lucas, just returning from the prison labor workshop, dragging his exhausted body into a single-occupancy cell, is handed the latest court summons by the guards, learning that his final overseas fortune to turn the tide has been completely frozen and that he faces a second prosecution. He can no longer bear the double torment of mind and body. His legs give way, and he collapses onto the cold concrete, his hands gripping his hair so tightly that he howls a desperate and wailing cry. In the women's ward, Chloe also receives the news that her overseas assets have been completely liquidated. She frantically claws at the walls, crying hysterically, only to be met with the taunts of fellow inmates and the cold warnings of the guards. They have spent their entire lives greedily calculating, and in the end they have lost even a trace of dignity and a path back. As night fully falls, the Pacific wind flows through the floor-to-ceiling windows, brushing away the last speck of dust. I take Ethan's hand and lead our daughter out to the terrace, gazing at the vast, endless starry sky and the glittering city lights in the distance. The old wounds have long since vanished under absolute control and sincere protection. And my legendary life is now accompanying the ever-expanding empire beneath my feet, moving toward the dazzling and boundless sea of stars.